Good evening and welcome to the Township of South Orange Village Planning Board regular meeting, Monday, August 4th, 2014. Jetta, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Colton-Max.
Here.
Mr. Lerner.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Reverend Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Allen.
Here.
Mr. Chambers.
Here.
And Ms. Harris.
Here.
Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2014 to the South Orange Maplewood News Record and the Star Ledger in December 2013, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the regular meeting held on Monday, June 2nd, 2014. These were sent out in advance by Jetta. Thank you for preparing them. I will entertain any discussion, and if there is none, a motion to adopt.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, one abstention. Adam, lame excuse. Newborn child. Can't make the meeting. So, for those of you who happen to have a copy of the agenda in front of you outside in the audience, we are going to make a change in the order in which the items are going to be heard this evening. We are going to basically take the last item on the agenda first, which is the discussions of the, how many of them are there? Several resolutions before this board. I have to ask council, do I have to read each and every one of these?
No.
Okay. So suffice it to say, these are the discussions for items 2014-186 through 2014-195 and 2014-197. When that discussion is complete, we will go back to the agenda as stated, the approval of resolution, and then the two applications to be heard for completeness. So we started the discussion at the last meeting. Some information was shared in the interim, and I would be open to any discussion at this point. Susan, since you circulated your memorandum on the redevelopment process, perhaps it might be wise or helpful if you could say a few words about that, and then perhaps we can have the discussion go forward from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also distributed to all the board members, based upon the request from the last meeting, a list of all the block and lots and property addresses of the proposed study areas, and identified them not only in a chart but also on the map so that all the board members would have that, as well as distributed the aerial map with those on it as well. So just so the administrator had distributed a memo which addressed some of the board members' questions, and I know that he is here, so I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe he's here in case anyone has any specific questions, and I see one of the Board of Trustees members as well.
Two.
Let's
start by seeing if are there any questions that the board has for Ms. Gruhl, for our planner?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Isn't it normal in some redevelopment projects when you're examining an area for redevelopment that you're examining an entire area and trying to assemble larger blocks of property for more economic development such as office buildings or shopping centers or what have you, strip centers?
There is no longer no normal way in terms of how redevelopment studies occur. It depends on the character of the area and the intent. It is not unusual, I guess I'll say it this way, it's not unusual in certain developed communities, particularly along commercial corridors, to identified scattered sites that would be more appropriate as potential redevelopment or potential development sites, in addition to mixing and matching rehabilitation and redevelopment. So even if particular areas can't meet the statutory criteria as a redevelopment area, they may be able to be considered and consolidated as a rehabilitation area, which, as you know from the article, those have different criteria and have different powers as such.
But when you study an area, which obviously the Board of Trustees may have done, which I'm sure we'll hear about, but don't you generally look at the entire area
No.
before you determine which lot or block is going to be named as redevelopment?
No, the purpose of this is actually, this is the first step to determine whether areas or sites, particular properties meet the criteria. This is the first step in a process which has a number of steps involved with it statutorily. So the first thing is to identify the area to be studied, and that's what this does. And then it's a matter of evaluating that area to be studied, which is, the area to be studied is within the jurisdiction of the Board of Trustees. The actual area and the evaluation of that area is, and the ultimate recommendation back to the Board of Trustees is, and the public hearing and listening to the public as such statutorily, is this board's responsibility.
But it's already been predetermined which parcels are selected for redevelopment.
No, it's been predetermined what parcels will be studied to determine
I'm sorry,
whether they
studied
meet
is
the
saying we're just
criteria.
dealing
It
in
is not the
semantics.
same at all, because these parcels may or may not meet the statutory criteria. So that's what this is, the purpose of this is to determine whether they do or not. There is a possibility that none, all, or some meet the criteria, and then that's what the purpose of this is. And it is within the jurisdiction of the Board of Trustees to determine which parcels should be studied.
Right, I understand that, and then the Board of Trustees has determined, I'll call it parcels 1 on the farther end to number 5 on the front end, right on Teichner Avenue or near Riggs Place. And then there was number 9, which I think, didn't that drop off?
No.
No, that's still there, 9.
Susan, can you elaborate, because there are a number of members from the public here tonight who and anybody who is here this evening will have an opportunity to be heard before we're through this evening. But can you clarify for the people who are here this evening and for us up here, what the process is in terms of how we get from one end of this to the other, assuming we go from one end to the other?
Sure. The first step was the Board of Trustees determining whether, what parcels, and whether they wanted to look at any parcels to be investigated as an area in need of redevelopment. That was the first step. That then is, they passed a resolution, as you know, there are a number here, and then it is the responsibility of this planning board by statute to have a study done to determine whether the parcels meet the statutory criteria. If they don't, they don't. If they do, They do. There then is, based upon that report, which is a technical report, that is placed on file, and there is public notice that you, as the planning board, will hold a public hearing, and anyone that wants to come and review the report can do so. And that public hearing then is intended for you, as the body holding the public hearing, to listen to any of the public that want to be for it, against it, whatever, for you to review the report and your own individual knowledge, and for you to, as a body, to recommend all, none, or parts of the area to be designated. That resolution, and that is then forwarded back to the governing body, the Board of Trustees, and they, by resolution, the public hearing has already occurred at this level, but by resolution then determine whether they agree, modify, or disagree with the recommendation coming out of this board. They are not held to what this board determines. And then they, again, by resolution, would designate an area if that is the case. The next step is then the preparation of a redevelopment plan, which, as noted in the article, that's a hybrid of a master plan and a zoning ordinance. It's kind of both, has pieces of both. That is prepared by ordinance, and that is either prepared through, and it's the Board of Trustees determines whether that is prepared as a draft through the Board of Trustees or is prepared as a draft through the Planning Board. Under either scenario, the Planning Board has input into that, as you recall, with the last one was Third and Valley. Okay, and then that is adopted by ordinance, ultimately by the Board of Trustees. I would just note, and I think that the memo from Barry Lewis notes this, is the existing redevelopment statute is very specific and very, some people would say, weak in the statutory requirement for public hearings and public input. There is only a required public hearing here at the Planning Board for the original discussion of designation, and there is an original, there's a public hearing as any ordinance adoption for a plan at the governing body level. In this instance, there is an attempt, and there's a lot of discussion about this, about public outreach, and to make sure that the public is heavily involved in the process.
Okay. So, and I should just note, there is one resolution which has nothing, which we are being asked to look at this evening, which is not dealing with an area in need of redevelopment, but dealing with an area in need of rehabilitation.
Yes, and
That's 2014-197 as opposed to all the others. Can you just clarify what that, I don't think that's why most people are here, but it is something we have to deal with. So can you clarify that as well, please?
Yes, and it goes to, partially it goes to what, one of the comments that Michael had asked. There is also, within the redevelopment statute, the opportunity to designate all or a portion of a municipality as an area in need of rehabilitation. There are 3-4 criteria for that, one of which is the housing stock. The majority of housing stock is over 50 years in age and can be rehabilitated. That resolution is to determine whether the entire area, the entire village can be designated as a rehabilitation area, which has certain benefits beyond, potential benefits beyond Irvington Avenue. We have seen communities where they've used the rehabilitation designation to provide short-term tax abatement to homeowners when improvements are made to their property, and so there's certain benefits, tax benefits to that, so they aren't being penalized for those improvements. There is, under the rehabilitation statute, there is absolutely no eminent domain option, and there is no long-term tax abatement option.
Right. And what action is required on that? You know, what is the process for that? Is it similar? Is it different?
It's a simpler process. There tends not to be the rigidity that the redevelopment study has in terms of public hearing and such, and it makes sense because there is no eminent domain option available under that.
But this evening, the action that this board can take is to authorize a study to be done, one for each of the redevelopment areas, for one or all or none of the redevelopment areas, and then also to do a study of whether or not the township should be named an area in need of rehabilitation.
The Board of Trustees, by statute, actually is the one that authorizes the studies to occur, but you have a key role in the process, which is to evaluate the study, to evaluate it under the criteria, and to make and hold the public hearing and make the recommendations.
But you haven't begun any work as of the
The
point of this.
authorization really occurred at the Board of Trustees level.
So you have already started work?
Not really,
Oh.
no. I was really waiting for tonight.
But there is no formal action required by this board this evening?
I mean, you can ask your legal counsel,
Okay.
but our experience has been no.
Patrick?
That's true, although typically this board has always, when asked to study, asked our planner to conduct the study.
Right.
Okay. So we can, but also are not required to ask, that she would proceed otherwise.
He has been authorized by the Board of Trustees.
Okay. And specifically, higher gruel has been authorized, not just that a study has been authorized.
That I don't know. I am assuming that's true.
Well, I suppose we can let those, the administrator or other elected officials speak to that subject. My thought would be the next step would be to ask the administrator, perhaps, or one of the elected officials to come up and say a few words, and then we can proceed with the hearing as such.
Good evening. Initially, I do want to make it a point to recognize and apologize to the board for the last month. It was kind of a weird set of circumstances where the Board of Trustees, I think, passed resolutions, and within a week, we had an intervening holiday, and then we had a circumstance where some of the public members, the government members, were not here. But I'm happy to address any questions anyone has, happy to elaborate perhaps on some of the questions Mr. Miller had. I did do a memo and tried to address all the questions that were submitted in writing in advance. I don't know if you want me to just sort of address some of them up front or see if...
I think you should assume that perhaps we've read the memo, but there are probably others watching who haven't
Certainly.
seen it or even know about it. So perhaps you might address some of those points. And there was the one question that I also just asked about whether the Board of Trustees authorized specifically higher gruel to proceed with the study, or was it just that a study be done? So
Okay.
I don't know if you can address that or if that question should be
Barry,
asked.
for the
by-
record, would you identify yourself?
Oh,
to
yeah,
the
I'm Barry
public?
Lewis, Village Administrator, for anyone here who doesn't, and I kind of feel bad with my back, but I'm going to do the best I can. So specifically, yeah, the board authorized the studies. The board did authorize and recommend higher gruel and the amounts of the proposals quoted. Ultimately, I think it's the planning board's determination should you choose to use someone other than Hire Gruel. But certainly that, I think, was the recommendation, and in evaluating moving forward, obviously, the cost component and budgeting, and so we did solicit from Susan and got that proposal. So specifically for, the board's benefit and for the public, some of the questions that were asked, one Mr. Miller alluded to, typically and historically, it's much more common that you would see large tracts maybe incorporated under study, and I think there's really two, but as Mrs. Gruel indicated, that's not required, and the law certainly allows you could have an area of one parcel, and in fact, I think we do in a couple of these areas. But what's happened, really, it's been an evolution of redevelopment law, the combination between statutory amendments and recent case law that has put a much higher standard, much more very clear mandate both from the courts and the statutes that you have to have substantial evidence to support a designation. So when we went out there to look and evaluate, I would say globally the whole corridor was looked at initially. This included Mrs. Gruel, our redevelopment counselor, Mr. Bauman, myself. When you looked at the various parcels, there's two things in mind. One, I think before you go ahead and just throw a property in a study, you should at least have some good faith basis to believe that it might meet the criteria. And clearly, when we went down the blocks, there were areas, and again, it either has to meet the criteria or it has to be necessary to the effective redevelopment of an area. And when you go down Irvington Avenue, there was, for example, the new building that Said recently built. There's certainly no way looking at that any reasonable person could say that should be included in a study or be necessary to the effective redevelopment of anything on either side of it, because nobody's going to tear it down. Similarly, and predominantly I think on the other side of the street, you progress through where you would see a commercial property, not well maintained, maybe somewhat neglected, that, at least on there's a prima facie basis to believe that it would meet the criteria to include it in the study. But then you may have two or more single-family homes perfectly maintained, no history of any violations. So standing alone, there did not seem to be any basis for those properties to be included. And then when you looked at the necessary to the effective redevelopment of the parcel, Irvington Avenue was developed essentially, it's predominantly all residential other than the properties that front on Irvington Avenue. So essentially you have a very narrow corridor, only one parcel deep going down both sides of the street. And when you look at it, individual 100-foot deep lots in the middle of the two corners where maybe the two corners warranted it, it's kind of a reach to say, oh, you need to add those two in so you can have this little skinny connecting piece to connect the two corners. And I think the other component of it is at least what is the vision, and from that I think we sought guidance from the vision plan. And to Mr. Miller's point, nobody's envisioning large-scale redevelopment on Irvington Avenue in terms of large office buildings, shopping centers. To do that, you'd really start encroaching into the neighborhoods, down the side streets, and gobbling up more and more lots. And that was never the vision. The vision was to keep it in a smaller retail/residential-centric, but still in the, I think along the lines and of a mass and scale that is consistent with and complementary of the surrounding residential neighborhood. And if you're going to look at it from that approach, you don't need whole block-long, 100-foot wide skinny strips. And so those, I think, were the factors, and again, coupled with the much higher legal standard that I think yielded. So again, initially, every parcel essentially from, I would say, Riggs all the way down to Seton Place on both sides of the road was studied or looked at, and only those that there was a good faith basis to say that those would likely meet the criteria were included. The next question, and I kind of lumped some of the questions together because they seem to meet together for an answer. One of the questions was in terms of notice, and will property owners be noticed? Why haven't they been noticed? And as I indicated, and as Mrs. Gruel alluded to, the statute is relatively sparse. You could do the whole study without telling anybody, and then 2 2 weeks before, then we put a notice in the paper, and you deliver notice to only the properties in the study areas, and they show up for the public hearing. And certainly that is not anything I would recommend, most assuredly nothing the Board of Trustees recommended, not consistent, I think, with South Orange as a whole and what the philosophy and the vision of inclusionary and transparency. Our intention, we have already attempted, and I should have I neglected to mention Trustee Collum, Trustee Schnall, Aaron Law from our redevelopment council here as well, I'm sure to answer questions as well. But actually, Trustee Collum, Trustee Schnall, and myself have already gone out to maybe a quarter or a third of the neighborhood, and the intention is to go literally door to door, introduce ourselves, explain the concept to everybody. Beyond that, the intention is to have at least 2 public hearings, invite everyone in the area, relatively informal town hall type meeting. Prior to and in advance of those hearings, we're putting together hopefully a fairly comprehensive informational package in layman's terms, explaining what the process is, addressing some of the rumors, speculation, sort of threats. So we fully intend to be extremely transparent, extremely inclusionary, really have a lot of public outreach, invite them to all those public meetings, invite them to participate in the public hearing, and then again, certainly at the board level, because ultimately all this does is a study that comes back and says yes or no. It could be all of them, it could be none of them, it could be a few of them. We don't know. When we get to that point, then ultimately whatever this board, and then makes a recommendation back to the Board of Trustees, then there's a whole other step, which is, okay, these are suitable for redevelopment, but what kind of redevelopment do we want? And that begins the process of developing the redevelopment plan. And as Mrs. Gruhl alluded to, that's, it's kind of part of its planning and general principles, and part of it's in the nature of a zoning ordinance that has specific heights, uses, permitted uses. Through the formulation of that plan, there will be community outreach, community input. What is it you'd like to see? The Board of Trustees will sort of have a crack at it, as will the Planning Board, whichever order it goes in. And there's public hearings associated with that. So we are 100% committed to notice at every step of the process, far in excess of statutory requirement. The next question related in some way, it was, why is redevelopment being pursued for these properties? Are there other options? And would like to know if the town had in mind uses for those specific properties. So first off, there are options, and this undertaking these studies is just one way to evaluate whether that is one of the options. One of our options is to rezone the properties. One of them is to the overall designation of rehabilitation, or you could have done rehabilitation on a district-by-district basis, area by area, or to study whether they're eligible for redevelopment. I think from our perspective, the existing zoning has been in place for quite some time. It clearly has not provided sufficient economic incentive in most cases for anyone to redo the buildings, with the singular exception of Said's one building. There's a belief that at least studying, find out if they're eligible for redevelopment. If they are, develop a comprehensive redevelopment plan that is sensitive to the neighborhood, but also gives us the tools to provide the economic incentives to potentially see some redevelopment down there. Part of this was all informed by a public outreach, starting with the Seton Hall and the Market Research Project, that there was quite a bit of outreach, a significant amount of input from the public that really overwhelmingly demonstrated, both from residents, businesses, and the Seton Hall community, that nobody's particularly thrilled with what's down there now, and everybody would like to see it better. And our sense is that we need to find out what tools do we have to make that happen. And one of them is to find out if they're eligible for redevelopment. I think part of that is also the success that we've seen and are really starting to see now with utilizing those tools in the downtown, in the central business district. The Gateway is really maybe a month from opening. Third and Valley is well underway. Number of others sort of in the works. And those tools and the flexibility to model a project using the redevelopment plan to provide the pilots and economic incentives we're seeing it happen downtown, and I think we're committed and that we can see it happen on Irvington Avenue. So as far as what the specific uses are in mind, again, I think it's a little premature. I think that comes with the development of the redevelopment plan. Certainly the vision plan, I think, had a lot of discussion of what might be appropriate down there. We've gotten a lot of public input, what they would like to see down there, but ultimately those uses and what would be the permitted uses, I think, will kind of play out in the development of a redevelopment plan, assuming that the studies come back and find any or all of these properties are eligible. And then finally, and I think, maybe most importantly, to address is the issue of condemnation in eminent domain. As you may or may not be aware, historically, every time you did a redevelopment study, eminent domain was an available tool and was on the table. The recent amendment, there are kind of two different ways. You can go about it with eminent domain as a potential tool or without. After, significant, and it wasn't taken lightly, I think, discussion by the Board of Trustees, the option was to go and authorize the study to potentially include eminent domain. And I know that can be sort of a scary proposition to certain property owners. They're going to come take my property, and we're certainly all sympathetic to that. I think the village has a history of not using an eminent domain. To my knowledge, there's only one single instance, and that was the ShopRite site. Beyond that, we have no desire to spend a bunch of lawyers' fees and be in court for 3 years in an eminent domain process, and that is not the motivation. That having been said, particularly when we look at Irvington Avenue, there are certain property owners who, currently control or own certain significant pieces that have a very long and somewhat tortured history of neglect, of not doing anything, not maintaining the property, not moving on doing anything with the property. And I think the belief is that while that is ultimately always a tool of last resort, it's one that I think that the board ultimately decided that you need to have it, because if you get into that one situation where everyone else in the greater good all wants this and you have one. Again, we're committed to and fully believe that the flexibility afforded in redevelopment and zoning and permitted uses and being able to work directly with developers to make a project work, coupled with the economic incentives we'd be allowed to give, we're confident that will be enough to spur the redevelopment that everybody seems to want. So those are the questions that were specifically posed by the board in writing in advance by some of the members. Happy to address any other questions that anybody else has.
Barry, you mentioned an informational package and there were going to be informal meetings. I think you answered that here, but I'd like to hear it on the record about when those meetings are going to occur. It's before the studies are done. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely the intent. What I refer to, and I would hope before the end of August, informational packages will be out to every single property listed. We're going to expand the outreach in terms of the public participation and stuff to even surrounding neighborhoods, and anyone's welcome to attend. And I think we were targeting some dates in September for 2. We're going to, I think, try and do one after hours to accommodate those people, and another one perhaps during daytime hours to accommodate people, who's ever schedule, whatever it works. But 100%, that's before the studies are even completed, hopefully so that anybody whose property is affected will have a good working knowledge of the process, working knowledge where we're going, all well in advance of the public hearing.
Any questions from the members? Any questions from the members of the board?
Just a real small question first. I'm surprised that with your area 9.
That one's out.
So
Sorry.
That one's completely dropped out.
Yeah, that was should not have been in.
Okay.
That was actually just approved, I think, by the board.
You may want to change that's 2014195.
That's next to the last one on the agenda, correct?
Correct.
The resolution, though, mentions, really? It says 10006, lots 3, 9, 10, and 14. But area number 9 on this chart only includes 3, 9, and 10, but not 14. I guess it's still part and parcel of the same area, so. Okay, so 2014-195, that resolution was not adopted. It was adopted, but they're no longer interested in pursuing it.
No, I think that was not even adopted by the Board of Trustees, but it didn't get pulled off the map before it made it to you, I don't think.
But on the list of on the list of resolutions in the agenda that were provided, where it says discussions, it lists a number of them, and the last one for redevelopment on the last page of the agenda, the full one at the top, 2014-195, and it does refer specifically to that area number 9, with the exception I mentioned. So I just wanted to clarify if that was, it was my understanding that wasn't to be a part of it in the end, but I do see it here, and I see it here, so I'm trying to understand what I'm supposed to make of that.
And again, I'm not, where you're saying resolution number 9, or area number 9. Resolution 2014-195.
195.
And that was, what was that adopted? Okay. When all the rest of them were? Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't think you have a resolution at all on area number 9, which is a single parcel. That's the Family Buffet Restaurant. Resolution 2014-195, and I need to verify this, but is actually relates to certain properties unrelated to Irvington Avenue, back off the Taylor Place, Vose, in that area, which is an area that we're still not 100% certain on. That's what that,
So have you seen the map?
I have.
Okay, so number 9 does correspond with Resolution 2014-195?
Does not.
It does not?
Yeah.
No.
No, it does.
No, it does.
It
It clearly
does.
does.
It was revised so that it reflects that, because right at this point, it is one of the resolutions that was forwarded to this board. So that is the area that's outside.
Area
of the-
number 9 is 4 separate lots?
It is, well, there is no lot 14, okay? But 3, 9, and 10 are the ones that you and I spoke about. And that is on that map. That is reflected on that map. That is accurate.
That's not Family Buffet.
No,
No, that's the parking lot behind where
No.
like Mark Murphy's music studio is.
All right,
and
so when we're
Southworth
referring to
Pharmacy
area
and all
number
that.
9, are we looking at the Irvington Avenue map, or what are we looking at?
yes, but
Yeah, no,
it's
this
it's
is
shown
yeah.
in the upper
Last
left.
time it showed that, but this time it's showing something
So
else.
we're on the same page.
Yes.
And it's right opposite 9, it's right opposite Town Hall.
Right.
So it is
So-
in.
The resolution you're talking about is on Taylor Place.
The resolution,
Lot
Yes.
1006, lots 3, 9, and 10. Are
Correct.
all Taylor Place and Vose.
correct.
Right. So there is no resolution for Family Buffet, which is Area
No.
9.
No,
Correct. That's what I'm
No.
saying, right.
But-
Okay.
But there is a number 9 on the map that we have, which.
Up in the upper corner here?
Correct.
Right, that's Family Buffet, that's off the table.
No,
No.
no.
no, the latest,
No, Family Buffet's on Academy Street.
Jetta,
Okay.
Can you provide him
I
with
have a
one?
different map, then I apologize. I'm still looking at the map that you were, okay.
Right,
Gotcha.
the map last
Gotcha.
time is
I had the map from last time. Wasn't aware you were given a corrected map. Gotcha. Okay. So there was a new area number 9. We should have made that 10, once we dropped off 9.
Is-
Okay.
No,
so is that,
That's Resolution 2014-195.
and that is in fact something that was approved by the Board of Trustees?
That's
and
correct.
that is-
And those are properties that we're still not 100% certain, but we move forward with authorizing the study. Those are properties that have been reflected, they were in the original study, they have been reflected in every map as being within the CBD redevelopment plan, but when we're still scouring the historic ordinances and resolutions to find it, and there seems to have been, we don't know if they were considered merged with other lots or what, but that, I think in our view, is more of a technicality, because those have always been considered and treated as and zoned for redevelopment, but in the course of pulling a bunch of historic documents, those were, there seems to be a question as to whether there
So
was.
since we're on the same page, let me just ask the question then, because it seems, I just find it odd that you're going to study this, but 57 South Orange is not included, which has been vacant for 2.5 years. So I'm surprised.
Everything surrounding 9 is already unquestionably in the redevelopment zone. They're already in there. And we've always treated and considered those 3 parcels that are listed in Area 9 as being in there, and they were in the original study, as Susan can fill you. But for some reason, We don't know if it was a typo, or at least we're still looking to see if there was subsequently a corrective ordinance when the ordinance listed blocks and lots, and there's no record of any in the minutes or otherwise as to why they were ever taken out. Either we're going to find that this oversight was caught, and we don't have any reason to believe why they weren't. Obviously, if we do determine and find that they were, that somebody caught that error and ultimately, at which Susan pretty adamantly still believes is the case, because she did the maps based on it, then this becomes sort of a moot point and we don't move forward with it. Otherwise, it's sort of a formality because, again, the one, you're referring to the Blockbuster site? Yes. Yeah, that's in the redevelopment. Everything on either side of that surrounding it is all already in.
Any other questions from board members for Mr. Lewis?
So just, we're 100% on all the other ones then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
No,
Susan?
and I apologize. I was thinking the old 9 that's out, and then we renumbered this one 9.
Right. Susan, did you want to ask or add something?
Yeah, just as a clarification, picking up on what Mr. Lewis said about number 9, the Taylor Place area. That was in 1998 studied by a resolution. As we're talking about the process, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution, requested this board to study an area that wasn't the only parcel, it was a number of parcels for the downtown. And that was studied, and it was part of our report dated 1999, or 1998, I guess it was still. This board held a hearing on it, and it was ultimately in somewhere between 1998 and when the redevelopment plan was amended in 1999, these parcels were included in, because subsequent from 1999 forward, these parcels have always been in the CBD redevelopment plan area.
Okay.
So it's that gap of, I think, of finding the appropriate resolution, but it's always been considered as part of the area,
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
just to support what.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So, thank you,
Thank you.
Barry, for, what, I'm sorry? So this is not a public hearing in the sense, well, it's a public hearing, but it's not, there's no applicant with experts who are being questioned by the public. The comment should be directed to the board rather than questioning of, if there's a dialogue that needs to take place, there are 2 microphones, and certainly it can take place at a later point, but there will be plenty of opportunity for that further down the line. I mean,
And I'd reiterate, we're going to have 2 public, we're going to give personal notice to everybody and answer any questions anybody wants at the public, which will all be before the studies.
I do have one question, because it's just always kind of, if it's already been authorized, why are we here, why are you guys here? I don't understand. If the study's already been authorized, why are we spending, is this for the public? Is this for, because I don't understand. I mean, I understand that we need to know about it, but if, it sounds like it's already been voted on, it's already going to happen, so what's the deal?
Yes, certainly legally, the governing body is the one that authorizes it, and not to be blunt, they've directed you to do the studies. It's not an option that you can say yes or no. So the studies are going to happen. Ultimately, it's the planning board's charge to, if they choose to use their planner to do this study, certainly that's our recommendation. And then ultimately then to hold a public hearing on the study. So I think the point this evening was to sort of explain the process. Some, yourself being a planner, obviously may be more familiar with it than others. We have some new members of the board that have not been around in the whole redevelopment mode. And so it was more to address the questions, I think, in a sense, at least address the public by way of presentation, not necessarily question and answer, which I think is probably better suited to that sort of less formal town hall, take your time, answer anything you want, show you things, that type of thing. But, I mean, your point, there is no formal action short of your, I guess, determining whether you want to authorize Mrs. Gruel's firm to proceed with the study. But
at the we were brought, there were several items that were put on our agenda. And there was, at the last meeting at least, nobody at the meeting who was able to address from the administration standpoint, from the Board of Trustees standpoint, who was here. The officials on the board were not here, et cetera, et cetera. So There were questions that were raised. There were two members of the public who were here last time. There were questions raised, which quite frankly, I think we were all interested in hearing the answers to. So we prevailed upon, on the administration to come and explain. Members of the public have chosen to come as well this evening. I think we should, as a board, take some kind of specific action to authorize hire Gruel to go forward, or for the study to be done, or both. But in any case, at a minimum, that's the reason why we did things this way. So,
One further question.
Yeah.
Have funds been appropriated inside the budget for this study?
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, this is an open public hearing. I should point out that there are 2 microphones that are available to you. If you would like to come up on the stage, you're certainly welcome to. There's a microphone there. For those of you who wish not to come up or can't or would prefer not to, there is also a microphone at the front of the stage. Please, any member of the public is welcome to come up. Just ask that you please provide your name and address. Thank you. I'm not going to say that after he spoke all that time.
Good evening.
My name is Ann Wilson.
Yes.
228 Village Road, South Orange. I'm asking that that there's another opportunity to look at one of the lots that are being considered in the study. Specifically, it's the largest one. I think it's Lot 6 on your map. During the vision plan presentations, there was quite a bit of repercussion about including that lot in redevelopment, and I think we need to kind of think about it again. I don't know, I see several of my neighbors here. I don't know if they're here for that particular lot. Primarily because people's backyards, neighbors on West Fairview, Village Road, their backyards back onto that lot. And those are homes zoned as one-family homes. The other piece is that there are already people living on that lot. There's homes on that lot that date to the early part of the last century, including a home that was the house of one of the first African-American families in South Orange. So I really, really think before we go forward with this study that that particular lot needs a second look.
May I ask you a question? Thank you.
Yes.
For your, and I don't mean to cut you off. You're done. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. You said that lot. I mean, on our list.
I think it's 6 on your map.
Right. The area number 6 consists of 7 different lots. You're
Yes.
referring to all of them?
Yes.
When you, okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other, I didn't know if anybody else had a question. I was just asking my own. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I'm just really quick, were you suggesting to add to that or take away? I didn't understand the,
Review whether it's, I understood that it was to review.
Mo, he's asking. If you
I
can,
was just saying to take another look at
That's
that
correct.
could you
particular
please
lot.
speak to the microphone? Sorry, people at home won't be
I'm
able to
not
hear you.
sure why it was considered originally
okay.
as a lot to be considered, but I think it just needs another look. It may be fine, I don't know, but there are people living there, and it does back onto the backyards of several of my neighbors.
Just so I'm clear, when you say to take another look to see if it should be studied or?
Yes.
And maybe potentially not be studied, is that what you mean?
Well, I wish it would not be studied, but,
Okay,
okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Elaine Harris, and I am a property owner and a business owner on Irvington Avenue for 40 years or more. And I feel that the intention of this board to go in the direction of redevelopment is very misguided, and it should be looked at very seriously, because from our point of view, redevelopment is nothing more than a land grab. And it was confirmed tonight by Mr. Barry Lewis that eminent domain is contemplated for the redevelopment concept that you're pursuing here. It would not be good for the neighborhood. It would result in some aberrant results. Just take a look at Valley and Third right now. I see it every day because I have the vantage point of being next door to it, and I'm taking a very good look, and I also am informed as to what they're doing under the redevelopment law. It's going to be 6 stories high, no setbacks. It's massive. It's going to change the character of this village. But at least there, it's bordered by the some major streets and the railroad. Irvington Avenue is a village. It has a certain silhouette. If you allow redevelopment, you're going to destroy that silhouette, and you're going to threaten the homes that are in that area, many of them are historic. Well, in other communities, they would be deemed historic because they're century-old buildings and they have a certain character to them. As soon as you allow for the redevelopment, you're going to redline these properties. They won't be saleable or marketable by the people who own them. You're going to create a situation that we try to avoid, where you have no public bidding, where developers will come in and they'll have their tax abatements and they'll get their quick profit off some type of a rapid build development that won't be consistent with the character of the neighborhood around it. And we also know from experience that you don't need redevelopment to accomplish the result that you want. You want to see the area revitalized or looking better. There are incentives that you can give property owners to do this. And many things in South Orange have been built and revitalized without redevelopment, like Town Hall Deli, like Rickleton's. We have plenty of places, like the doctor who just did the Rapid Print building. You didn't need redevelopment. Yeah, he happens to be in a redevelopment zone, but it wasn't accomplished through redevelopment. The idea here was to reimagine Irvington Avenue. We don't have to. It's something we can see without reimagining. We can imagine it by looking at Valley and Third. That's what will happen to Irvington Avenue. It seems to me that there must be some type of a private or hidden agenda behind this. Maybe somebody is looking to do affordable housing or dense housing, or some other developer that has an inside track has an agenda. And the people are going to be victimized by this. This is really an ideological divide here, because some people do believe that the government should come in and take over property, declare it in need of redevelopment, and then allow private developers to do what they want. Other people believe that the government should not be taking private property by eminent domain. And we believe in that so strongly that we will fight very hard to prevent it from happening, because it's an ideological thing. It's not just about planning. Many times I've been before the board here for planning, and you make good decisions because you have to. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But those are decisions that are made on a case-by-case basis. This one is major. This is about an ideology of whether it's okay for the government to come in and take over other people's property or not. And that's a very, very powerful belief that some of us will not allow to happen, not lightly. But you talk about public outreach. There hasn't been any public outreach so far. So if this is a pattern, then this is what we can expect to happen down the road. There hasn't been any visible effort for the board or the Board of Trustees to contact all the owners who are affected and really educate them on what your planning is. It has trickled out to the community, but it hasn't trickled out through an official public outreach that you claim that you're going to do. So I could say that this is not the first time in this community that I have spoken out publicly against redevelopment. It's actually probably the third. And one time in particular, I'm glad I did, because I saved my own property on Valley Street from being taken away. And I'm glad I did, because then I was able to sell it privately, which is the way it should happen. The best way for redevelopment is for a developer to go to a property owner with a checkbook. I want your property, and I'm willing to pay for it. That's how you do redevelopment. The building that I own is over 100 years old on Irvington Avenue. If I were to sit back and allow redevelopment, I think the building would be threatened. Maybe not the first go-around, but then after that. And I just worked too long and too hard, and I don't want to let that happen. And I think a lot of people here feel the same way I do. I don't know if they're going to come up and speak, but I know that they feel that way. So I'm urging you to put the brakes on this process. I don't think you have really taken the pulse of the community yet. I don't think you've really polled them or spoken to them and really got the idea of what's going on here. And I think you need to do that before you go any further in this process. At least that's what I'm asking you to do, and I hope you'll consider that, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Doug Zacher. I live at 195 West Fairview Avenue in South Orange, and I am chairman of the Irvington Avenue Corridor Advisory Committee, which is a mouthful to say, and we've been at work for the last 5 or 6 months. It is a committee that was started by the trustees. It's made up of residents and business owners in order to make a better Irvington Avenue. We've seen, I've lived in town for 9 years. In those 9 years, I've seen nothing done on Irvington Avenue based purely on market forces. Having dug in real deep as chairman of this committee, I've gotten to talk to lots of residents. I've gotten to talk to business owners. And based on that feedback, as well as feedback from market research that was done in conjunction with Seton Hall University, I am certainly of the belief, based on all that evidence, that the town needs to look into whatever tools are necessary to make Irvington Avenue better, to make it more vibrant, to bring in more foot traffic, to bring in better, stronger businesses. And this study is the first step to getting there. As such, the Irvington Avenue Committee did exactly what you all did. We asked lots of questions. After watching the video last week, I sort of laughed because we had all exactly the same questions. And it was unfortunate that there was nobody here to answer those questions. And based on the answers to all those questions, the committee feels that it is best for Irvington Avenue to do this study, knowing that the study really is, it's a study of what is. It's not a study of what's gonna be, it's just what is. And once we know what's there and what we're working with, we could then work to envision what's actually gonna be there. So I, for one, am very excited about the study happening. I'm very excited to participate in the outreach to my fellow neighbors. I'm spearheading the drive to have these community forums, which so far we're looking at the first and second weeks of September. We're expecting to hold them at Bethel so that they're nearby, they're within walking distance of everybody in the community. And present there will be Mr. Levinson, Ms. Gruhl, the town's development council, if I'm saying that right. I'm still learning all this myself. And myself to answer questions. And I look forward to that dialogue. And I certainly believe that that is the place to start having this dialogue that Ms. Harris just talked about, to really think about what should be there, what could be there, what everybody wants there. Because I feel this is a really exciting time for Irvington Avenue. The committee has worked to already beautify things. We are working very closely with the town. We brought in the hanging baskets. We had a beautification day. And we're working very closely with the businesses to make it look better. The biggest problem with making it look better, though, are some of the landlords. Regardless of what the businesses want, landlords remain a giant obstacle there, which is why the committee also agreed to have the study look into redevelopment with condemnation on the chance that something needs to be done about those landlords and those landowners who really make it impossible to make Irvington Avenue better. So, thank you all very much.
Before you leave, I'm just curious, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Can you just give us a makeup of your committee?
The committee is made up of myself, 3 residents, and 2 business owners. Yes, business owners on Irvington Avenue.
Okay, any other
Is-
questions?
Yeah, have you guys looked at, because you're talking about landlords, and I've got some experience with talking to some landlords, and in terms of office space, have you guys looked at what a typical, the amount of office space that you have on Irvington, and have you looked at it, at like the square footage of, and what cost that typically is on Irvington versus other parts of South Orange?
No, I mean, I am not a development expert. I've dabbled in a previous job, but am far from any sort of development expert, which is why when we had the same questions you all did, we brought Ms. Gruhl in. We actually spoke about this in conjunction with the town's development committee, many of whom are experts in development, and they were able to answer lots and lots of questions.
And just so, because I'm kind of new to this, what, you're saying the landlords are holding back this process. Can you give an example of that?
Let's see, a great example. So a new nail salon moved in to Irvington Avenue in a building, let's see, I have the map, I could tell you which, right on the corner of Fairview and Irvington Avenue. It is part of parcel 4, number 4. They came in, brand new business owners, eyes wide open, they want to open a business. They take everything they have, they invest in building out their shop with full expectations that their electricity is going to work well, their air conditioning is going to work well, their lights are going to work well. When they open, there is no air conditioning. The landlord says that's your problem. The air conditioning, they had never, I guess, to their own fault, they never thought to test it before moving in. The landlord said it worked. So here you have a brand new shop, wants patrons, they're opening in July. They want patrons to come in, sit, relax, get their nails done, and it's over 100 degrees in the store, and the landlord, you could have, okay, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, didn't know the air conditioning was going to work, but yet wasn't planning on doing anything about it. The business owner has no money to fix it, so their business starts to spiral downhill because who wants to get their nails done when there's no air conditioning? And they eventually might go out of business as a result. They leave, somebody new comes in, you repeat that cycle again and again and again, and that's what's happened on Irvington Avenue in a nutshell.
But how do you understand that to be a redevelopment issue?
It's my understanding that areas deemed to be in need of redevelopment provides the town with tools to I don't know what's the right word. I don't know, to enable, basically, they had, it provides them with some substance to go after the landlord. Whether, I don't know, I don't know. Again, when it was explained to me as a good tool for landlords whose buildings are decrepit, dilapidated, when I heard the explanation, it sounded sufficient to me. Again, as an expert, I didn't memorize it. I can't necessarily speak to it, and I apologize for that. But it certainly sounded sufficient for me at the time.
Well,
Okay.
since we have both the planner and redevelopment council here, is it possible that either one of you could elaborate on that? Because, I'm sorry? Am I out of line?
No, I'm talking, yeah, I think you are a little bit. Look, I think we're treading into the realm where it's controlled by a lease document, and it's a landlord-tenant issue. And,
Right.
I don't have the lease in front of me, so I can't tell you what
mean,
the tenant
the
has
way-
agreed to or what the landlord, I just think we're getting out of our
Right,
field.
excuse me. The way I understand the process to work, I believe all these questions to be right for down the road, not necessarily right when talking about whether or not we're going to study this. At least that's my understanding of it.
I believe that we're having a discussion where you have members of the public here who are hearing about what it means to be in an area in need of redevelopment. So far, the only thing that we've discussed in this tonight has been eminent domain. So if I were sitting in the audience, I might think that's really the only thing we're discussing. So a question was raised by a member of this board as to what it means beyond just eminent domain. How does it either empower a landlord, or how does it empower the municipality to make a landlord improve their property, which appears to be a significant point. So if there's somebody who is an expert on this subject who can speak to that, that's why I'd like to hear from, we have two people who potentially could speak to that. I would like to hear that, so I'll exercise my prerogative on that.
Be my guest, I just
And if I
disagree.
misspoke, I'd be happy to be told that I misspoke.
Okay. Please. And again, please identify yourself for the,
Hi, I'm Erin Law. I am redevelopment counsel. I work at McManaman, Scotland and Bauman, and I'm actually redevelopment counsel to the township. First, I just want to reiterate, I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now is sort of a discussion that'll happen again when we talk about the redevelopment.
I think you need to speak into the microphone a little bit more closely.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Nope, okay.
They're the ones that flash in the back if we're not
Okay.
doing our job.
Should reintroduce myself. I'm Erin Law. I am redevelopment counsel to the township. I work at McManaman, Scotland and Bauman. We I have bronchitis. We've been talking a lot about things that relate, I think, to the redevelopment plan, and I'm happy to go through what tools will empower the township to move forward, but I just want to reiterate, right now we're just talking about a study. The township has requested that the planning board engage in a study, and the way you memorialize moving forward with the township's request is by resolution. But again, this is just a study so that you can empower a planner to review all of these different areas. It's not time to figure out what's going to be built. It's not condemnation time. That's not what's going on right now. It's just an initial introduction to redevelopment. In the future, one of the tools that's always mentioned is condemnation. However, that's just one of the many opportunities that the redevelopment law puts forth. There are also tax incentives that could happen. It gives the redeveloper and the township a better way to communicate through contractual relations rather than the developer picking what to build and the township saying that's what we build. You can maintain what's there and rehabilitate it. That's also an option. There are various different methods that can go along. Once we get to the redevelopment plan, this isn't even a designation discussion. This is just a request to do a study. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Right, I understand that. I think the point My hope, and maybe I'm being a little bit idealistic about this, or maybe I hope I'm not wasting people's time, but I see a number of people in this audience who have spent the time to come in. They have questions and concerns and thoughts, and they're going to share some of them. Some of them already have their points of view. I understand we're not at the point where there's no study that's been done, and we're still going to be lots of opportunities. However, since we are here, if we could at least understand a little bit more of what redevelopment or being designated as an area in redevelopment means, aside from just the big hammer of being able to take people's property away from them, I think it might help to explain why we're going through this process and that it is not solely devoted to that potential. So that's why I wanted to ask if it could be explained, since it was raised by, if it hadn't been raised, I might not have raised the question at all, but since it was raised, I wanted somebody, since I knew there was an expert in the audience already, to perhaps explain in a little bit more detail so that people who have spent their time coming out this evening would have a slightly better understanding. Not to say that anything specifically has been planned or will be planned or any of these things will be done. Perhaps nothing will be done in the end. But that's what the hope was in asking you to say a few words about it. But
Sure. It allows the town to purchase the property. It allows a property owner to redevelop their own property if designated by the town. It allows certain incentives to work with PSC and your public service, gas and electric, your cable companies, things like that. It allows the township to assist in the development along those lines. It allows the town to work with the property owners or the redevelopers to have a more cohesive plan that works with the corridor. So two properties that are working right next to each other are being developed in a symbiotic way. But mostly the things that people look at are the financial incentives, which are available.
thank you. That's very helpful. Yes, Danny?
Do we have any idea, does anyone have an idea about when a redevelopment district is created, what the general or normal or average percentage is of the use of eminent domain?
There's no average use of eminent domain. Many projects don't require eminent domain at all, just because we're saying at the designation at the study portion that we would like the option to use eminent domain, it does not mean that all the properties that are studied and designated are going to be subject to eminent domain. In order to use eminent domain at any point, we have to identify that we would like to use it at this point. There's no looking back. So if 10 years down the line we have a donut hole property where we've assembled all the properties around it and there's one property in the middle, we would have to start all the way over again at the study to say we would like the ability to use eminent domain.
And whose decision is that?
It would be the municipalities, the township, or the redevelopment agency if there's one designated.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for indulging me. Other members of the public wishing to be heard? Okay.
So someone should say that.
Thank you for indulging me. You could please provide us with your name and address.
Yes, my name is James Johnston, and I live at 266 Irvington Avenue. And that is one of the properties being considered. As I told you before, my family has owned it for 95 years. The only reason why my property is being considered is because it's 50 by 440 feet. We all know you can indict a ham sandwich, so I'm quite sure it will be deemed in need of redevelopment. But it is not zoned for anything. And the owner of the two similar properties next to me had them for sale last year. And there was some interest because I was contacted, but they were a bit put off because It wasn't zoned where they could know what they could do with it, and they didn't want to go through the whole process. So that you have 3 properties that total 1.5 acres, not zone viable. You know, they're not making more any land, and it is 10 minutes to the train station. But the Irvington Avenue Corridor Committee, I did attend some of their meetings. One thing that somewhat amazes me, after hardly 5 months, we're at a stage talking about study, which will then put properties in redevelopment. The Irvington Avenue Corridor Committee should have had neighborhood meetings that we are talking about now before it got this far. And I was adamant that the property owners affected should have been told all along. And it's very sad that a committee, I think all the members on that committee have not lived in town as long as I have. And to have people who have lived here 4 years, 5 years, and that's great they came here, but what do they know about any history or what went on in the community, or when Irvington Avenue was a viable business district, and basically why? Decisions that you see were made, they're not familiar with the process, and they should have had neighborhood meetings. To have it now after it's being studied is very sad. And I'm really ashamed of the town that you would consider taking people's homes. And they had the option with this study to not have eminent domain, and they chose to have it. And that is, it's distasteful. And another thing, do not send a package about this to my home. My mother is 87. It won't be good for her. Thank you.
Okay. Other members of the public wishing to be heard? Okay, so, I'm sorry, you're getting up? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Janice Ellerby. I live at 128 Seton Place. I'm glad to be here and get some clarification on things. But when we talk about redevelopment, I understand it's a study now. Are you proposing to create multiple dwellings or new businesses? If you do anything with this land, what will it be?
So at this point, I think was explained, I think it was Mr. Lewis who actually either, or Ms. Gould that was talking about it before, that there are sort of 2 parts to the process. There is the part where you look at particular areas and determine whether or not they are areas in need of redevelopment. At that point, there's no specific plan that's being discussed publicly or that, to my knowledge, exists, at least in this case, privately even, as to what's to be done with that. The next phase, if and only if an area is deemed in need of redevelopment, then you would move on to putting together a redevelopment plan for those which would start to look at what would be uses that would be appropriate for that area. So at this point, all we're talking about this evening is proceeding with the study of these areas as being areas in need of redevelopment without any particular plan or concept as to what might be in one or another of those areas.
Well, I think that obviously you want to do something with this land, and we have zoning.
Could you please bring the microphone a little closer?
I think that obviously you want to do something with these lands, and obviously there seems to be issues about zoning. And right now, Irvington Avenue, as you know, is a very busy street. On my block, it could take me 3 minutes just to get out onto Irvington Avenue. So I'm concerned about that feel of developing things that created more or less a commercial atmosphere like you have downtown, which is okay because it is downtown. But once you start coming into the residential areas and you're still not clear on to how things are going to be zoned, and yes, I understand it's way early in the process for what's going to be there, but ultimately something is going to be there. It just does something to the feel of the residents, the area, in particular where I live. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Other members of the public wishing to be heard?
My name is Joanne Dowds, and I live on Montrose Avenue. I've been a resident here for 13 years. And I have listening to the conversation, the full impact of the conversation, I have two questions. One, why is the town unable to get rid of these landlords who are irresponsible? Why isn't that a focus of the town council? And also, I would highly suggest that you check with the National Association of Realtors about eminent domain, a vice president for Sotheby's International. Thank you.
Okay, so as it relates to the first question, I should just point out that as the planning board, we're not in the position to be able to do that. That would be something addressed to the Board of Trustees as to what they have or have not or could not do as it relates to these particular landlords. This board is merely in the position at this point of determining whether or not to proceed with studies for these areas. But I think your questions are appropriate, just they're not questions for this board to address. So I encourage you to go to the Board of Trustees and to your elected officials and to address those questions to them. So, any other questions or comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I think we'll close the public portion of the hearing at this time. And I'm now just going to open it for discussion among my fellow board members.
If I understand it, whatever this board decides is advisory. Is that accurate?
Patrick, you want to address that?
Advisory.
Well, if the trustees have already made the decision, then whatever this board decides is not an actual decision, it's an advice, and the only real question would be who the planner would be, and I'm assuming that if this board chooses not to say they don't want this study, then the town trustees still have the right to appoint a planner. I'm just asking if that's an accurate set of circumstances.
It's somewhat accurate, although the planning board, if you look at the statute, is the body that the governing body turns to help them with the process.
No, you have it off now. That's on.
So that the planning board is charged with having the studies done and having the public hearing and making the recommendations. But right now, we're only resolving whether or not who's going to be the planner, because we've been asked to do the study.
And the board has no choice but to do the study. Is that fair?
That's correct.
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, I will move the resolutions, and I will recommend that the firm of Hire and Gruel be retained to do the studies as requested by the Board of Trustees.
And for clarification, that's 2014-186 through 2014-195 and 2014-197?
That's correct.
There's not a 2014 194.
Oh, is there?
There's not.
No 4, no 6.
Okay. 2014-186 through 2014-193 and 2014-195 and 2014-197.
Yes.
Thank you
Yep.
for the clarification. You're absolutely right. Okay, so a motion has been made. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, I have a second. Jetta, will you please call the roll?
Reverend Wilson? Mr. Allen?
No.
Mr. Chambers?
You want us to come back to you?
Yeah.
Okay, please continue, come back.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Lerner? Yes. Mr. Colton Max?
Yes.
And Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the motions carry. Hire Gruel. Susan, can you give us a sense of what the time frame is for how long it will take you to complete these various studies that you've been now commissioned to move forward with? Give or take.
Yeah, we have to gather information as such. I would say it's around 3 months.
3 months. Okay. So we're talking about perhaps sometime in November. Yeah.
Yes.
Take my word
Time
for it.
flies when you're having fun and it's summer. Yes.
Right.
I just have one question. When the recommendations come, it's, so post-study, is it the trustees that determine if those are enacted or not?
We make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees as to whether or not an area should be named in need of redevelopment. The trustees can then ultimately choose whether to accept our recommendation or reject our recommendation. Ultimately, we are, to use Danny's term, advisory in that respect, because ultimately the board, we could say none of these areas are, and they could say they all, we hear you, but we're naming all of them. It could be vice versa, it could be some combination thereof. There's, ultimately, it's the Board of Trustees that has that authority. We do not have that authority.
So the reason I voted no is that if it were my advice, I would have been fine if there wasn't eminent domain. All the other parts of it would be fine. But I think that's a sticking point in a variety of cases, including Supreme Court cases, that I'm just uncomfortable with.
Okay?
I mean, it does seem, I mean, I also feel like that if the trustees are voting on these things before we're able to give any advice, there's already a direction that's being made, and that it puts us in a very awkward position to be voting on something post-mortem. And I would just say to the trustees that if they want us to feel like we're actually giving them advice, that they should wait to make decisions until they hear what we actually have to say.
But technically, under the MLUL, only the Board of Trustees, only the governing body can decide whether or not to start the process. They can't, we can't start the process and bring it back to them, at least not formally.
But they started the process by bringing the resolutions to the floor, right? I mean, and then, because, I mean,
yeah.
I'm just going to say, I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened. I'm sitting here, I'm being asked for my advice, but the decision's been made. And from my perspective, and it feels that it's not an authentic request.
Well, I'm not going to defend the request. It would have been nice to get a heads up on it before it was done, but the request was made. That doesn't mean that it's fait accompli. It still has to be studied by the planner. A report comes to the planning board. The planning board then reviews it and makes a recommendation as to whether accept it or not, or accept it with conditions. That's the time when our input is really needed. Now, obviously, our input can be overridden by the Board of Trustees, but still, that's the time to give the input onto whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. All right.
I mean, just to respond, I mean, I understand the process. It is the inclusion of advice pre-vote that I'm talking about, because I feel like this is what's gonna happen. We're gonna have a study, decisions, there are gonna be suggestions made, the trustees are gonna make votes, they're gonna come to us post-vote and ask us if we wanna do it or not. Because that's how it continues to happen over and over and over. I mean, this isn't the first time I've sat here going like, I've gotta make a decision on a vote, when I really have no like, it doesn't matter if I say yes or no. And I just don't think that that's the way that, you know.
I would think it, I understand your frustration. But I would understand if the planning board literally, by a majority, said no after the report came back. I would think the trustees would be hard-pressed to override that. Again, that's my personal opinion, it's not a legal opinion.
There are two things I would also, well, at least one other thing I would add to that. We could have been given information in advance of this. We have two members of the governing body who sit on this board, neither of whom are here this evening, and I'm not reading anything into that. I know one of them is not well, so there's a good reason for it. But we also have a member of the administration who is here this evening, and I think what I'm going to recommend, this was actually not my idea, it was brought to me by somebody else, but that we have on our agenda a standing report from the Board of Trustees, or at least its Planning and Zoning Committee, as to issues that are being raised, so that, because then we would have heard in advance the types of things that were being discussed prior to it reaching us. Now, that may not have changed anything in the end, but that is, but at least there was a distinct possibility that we would have been provided information in advance. So I'm just going to ask Jetta, I would like to have us add, unless anybody feels strongly otherwise, I would like to have it added as a standing item in our agenda that we receive a report from the Planning and Zoning Committee or some member of the governing body who is on this board, or a member of the administration, since we have three to choose from, to do that at our future meetings going forward. Perhaps that'll help a little bit.
Mr. Chair, I'd make one other suggestion. The trustees' meetings are all on video. It is very easy to look at the trustees' meetings on video and to go through them. I pretty much look at all of them, and I skim through it. I don't watch every second of it to pick up the points that affect the planning board, so that I have a better idea of at least what's happening. I can't control it, but at least I know what is happening. So I would recommend that all the planning board members look at those videos. They're very easy to go through, and especially now with the new website, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, but Michael, I think that's a great suggestion, but it misses the point. The point is, if the trustees want to engender trust, then they need to act in a trustworthy way. And to start something in one direction and then ask pro forma for advice, which may or may not really be asking for advice, doesn't feel trustworthy. It may be the legal manner in which it's done, but it doesn't feel trustworthy. And I think that's what our colleague is trying to explain to us.
And I'm not so sure. Let's not castigate the trustees for not being trustworthy.
I'm not saying they aren't trustworthy. I'm saying that's how it feels.
I don't think they're intentionally not trying to be trustworthy, the hours that they put in.
So,
okay.
So we have taken action. We discussed the matter. We have taken action. And I would like to suggest that we return to our agenda as it was brought to us this evening, which would mean we would be moving on.
Before you just leave this, I'd like one other suggestion. I would like to have a monthly report from our planner that we've just recommended, that we just approved, as to the status of this, as just a monthly follow-up.
So if we can make that a standing item on our agenda for the next few months until we receive the report and are ready for the public hearing. Susan, that work for you?
I'd be happy to do that.
If you could provide us with something in writing in advance, so much
Sure.
the better. Okay,
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Michael, is that?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
fine. That's
Okay.
all I want. This was a follow-up.
Okay, so moving on, I would thank you all who came here this evening. property owners, members of the governing body, and so forth. Thank you very much for your time. Moving on, approval of resolution, case number 234, 1014 Academy Street Corporation, Block 2013, Lot 3, 14 Academy Street, preliminary and final site plan. Applicant proposes to divide the premises into separate uses for a restaurant, continued use, and retail stores. This resolution was circulated to the members of this board prior to the meeting. Any discussion? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I have one point on item number 15, right before the decision and conditions.
Okay.
It's noted, and it may have been true at the time, that the municipal lots, including the parking lot adjacent to the now out-of-commission town hall, will be or may be available when it's completed. That may not be the case, and I almost think that should be mentioned here, because the village hall is out for an RFP for people to buy that and/or the lot. And so the statement in here that it may be, that is available for parking is not true, or may not be true.
Counsel?
Well, I'm hoping that this reflects what was the discussion of the board at that time.
Right.
It may change.
Whether or not it remains accurate after the meeting, it is still accurate at the time of the meeting. I mean, unfortunately, that's what the records reflect.
Unfortunately, I don't think it was accurate at the time of the meeting, because I think the RFP was already out, but we weren't aware of it until the time. Okay. I just want to make that note.
The record shall so reflect. With that, any other discussion, or I'll entertain a motion? So moved. Okay, so moved. Okay, second, Mary Wilson. Let me see, we have to do a roll, because I'm not sure everybody is eligible to vote. So, Jetta, can you call the roll, please?
Sure, Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Wilson.
Yes.
And Mr. Colton-Max.
Yes, Jetta, just got to hold it a little closer to the microphone there. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, application to be heard for completeness, case number 237, Cleanland LLC, Block 1007, Lot 22, 125 South Orange Avenue, preliminary and final site plan. Do we have counsel for the
Gary
applicant?
Haydu on behalf of Cleanland LLC.
Okay. Did you receive a copy of the memorandum prepared by our planner?
I did.
Do you have anything you wish to comment on or add as it relates to that?
Well, no, I understand that there's no objection to a number of the waivers that were sought. Now, the request is being made here that basically we go through a more formal site plan, which would include, of course, a survey of the property. And there's going to be extensive costs associated with surveying that property. We are a tenant in one unit of a 4-unit building, and we're going to incur probably a $2,500 fee, or somewhere in that vicinity, to survey this property. So I would ask that that condition be waived. All we're doing is a front facade for a new front door location. There's no alteration to the building itself other than the front door entrance.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
Yes.
respond to that.
Please.
The intent was not to incur major cost in terms of a new survey, whatever. When we use the term site plan, we meant it conceptually. There is no way of putting this, it appears in context to the property, the adjacent properties, how it relates to the back. So that the point being is, if you can do something with a conceptual site plan and have these kinds of details on there.
Well, certainly, putting the zoning map is no issue. That's fine.
No,
We have no problem
I
with that.
understand that. But what we're saying is it's very difficult when you look at these these plans, to understand it in context.
I think putting it in context might best be done by pictorial.
It is normally done by a concept site plan.
I
And that's what we're recommending, just like when you did the renovations for a couple of the restaurants, you asked for additional information as to site plan and context. That was the purpose of what that was, is to try to understand how it relates and what's on the site, and is it 100% covered? Where is the parking? How does the parking work? That's information that frankly you don't have based upon based upon what we have.
Well, in this particular site, of course, there is no parking. It's all on the street parking.
This is a storefront on South Orange Avenue that's being redeveloped into a cleaners, a dry cleaners, basically.
Yes.
And what they're adding is another exit and signage. Entrance, I should say, not exit.
It's an entrance and exit.
Right, and signage. I mean, I don't even know why it's here, but.
I think regarding the site plan, though, I think even an existing survey, if the property owner has an existing survey that shows where the building is located on the site, just adding that drawing and referencing, the survey when it was done, whatever, to the set would be helpful, so the board can get that perspective that Ms. Gould is talking about.
I will
Going out and
attempt to
getting
secure that.
a new survey, yeah, we understand that there's an expense associated with that, but if they have an existing survey, adding that to the packet, I think would be helpful. Then it's easier to get an understanding of the location of, the minor improvements that are proposed and things like that. And obviously showing that, yes, there is no parking on the site because the building pretty much takes up the entire site.
So you're saying you'd be willing to, you don't know whether or not.
I don't know if a survey exists from the owner. I can find out. And if one does exist, I'm quite sure that it can be incorporated in what we're doing here without a problem. That's not a significant task.
I just want to check in advance. Let's assume for a second, I'm asking my fellow board members, if that is not available, just want to make sure everybody here is going to be satisfied moving forward without there being a new, even conceptual plan done. If that's okay, that's fine. I just don't want to have the applicant come back and say we didn't find it, and then we say, oh, it's not good enough, and then they have to go back again. So I just want to clarify what they need to come back with or not come back with. So is that okay? If they come back with no survey, if it doesn't exist and they can't find it?
It's okay with me.
Adam?
Okay.
Yeah? Lillian?
Have any issues?
Reverend Wilson? Is that okay?
I think it's great. I think it's good as the way it is.
Okay. So then do your best.
I will.
That'd be fine. Any other questions concerning the report?
No, sir.
Okay, so all the other items that are indicated here, taking no exception, but, will be provided 10 days before the hearing, you're going to do those things that are in there.
We will.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? Any questions, I'm sorry, for the applicant's attorney? Okay, thank you. I guess we have to have a motion to declare the application.
I move that it be deemed complete, subject to the items we've discussed and items that will be furnished.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. I'm assuming we can just do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Will this be scheduled for our next meeting? Patrick, is that?
I'm just curious about one thing. This is just literally, it's a sign band in essence, doing an entrance. Does that really have to come to the planning board?
Effectively, it's an expansion because they're bumping the door out, they're changing the entrance and doing that. It's a facade change. And if you look at the ordinance, it does require it.
Okay.
Jetta, how's the schedule for September?
They will be first. I think the 3rd.
What is the date in September?
September 3rd, Wednesday, September 3rd.
Thank you.
Okay.
Still have it as the first.
All right, so you'll be prepared for the 3rd?
We'll send out our notices in publication, yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, we'll look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you then. Thank you. Okay, back to the agenda. We're now up to case number 238, South Orange Rescue Squad, Block 1906, Lot 2, 62 Sloan Street, minor site plan and C variance. Do we have an attorney for the application?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Good evening. Rob Simon from Herald Law on behalf of the applicant, South Orange Rescue Squad, Block 1906, Lot 2. We are in receipt of Higher Gruel's memo dated July 28, 2014. We have no objection to its contents. We intend to provide the information that is deemed to be outstanding, the few items. And other than that, we also received actually the Omlin Engineering report dated August 1st, and we're going to be addressing those during the substantive hearing, certainly, those
Okay.
issues.
If it's at all possible, I recommend if there's you can provide a written response in advance. It might facilitate things to move faster. If not, that's fine too. Just a
Good.
thought.
We'll talk to the professionals and certainly discuss that.
Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment. As you all may know, the rescue squad is currently occupying a garage on 4th Street off of Valley, and the condition is less than stellar, so to speak.
Right.
And so we would respectfully ask, under the circumstances and considering the job that the rescue squad does for this community, if we can possibly have a special meeting. I know there was some communications back and forth as to possible dates.
Let us first take our vote, and then that is definitely perfectly appropriate question to address. So do I have a motion then?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, abstentions? Okay, so yes, it's been deemed complete, subject to, okay. So you are requesting a special meeting of
Yes,
this
and
board.
I believe that based on my understanding as to the availability even of this room, let alone the members' availability, that Monday, August 25th is an available date for the applicant and their professionals.
Okay. So I am not available that night, which is
Nor am I.
fine. Okay. How many, there has to be at least a quorum, so, in order to even consider it. So, Adam, would you be available on the 25th?
Yes.
Okay. Lillian, would you be available on the
No,
25th?
I'm out of town.
No. Reverend Wilson?
Yes.
Okay, so far we've got two. I am not. Going down. Are you available on the 25th? Let's assume it's the same time,
So 7:30,
give or take, yeah.
can I get back to you?
Uh,
I need to, I gotta ask somebody else if I'm available.
Okay, well, so we've got, and Danny?
What's
Okay.
magic about the 25th? How about the 19th? Or,
It's based on nights that the room
I'm
is
sorry.
available. It's based on the nights that the room is available for them to meet, for you to meet here.
well, couldn't we meet in Town Hall? In one of the conference rooms in Town Hall?
No, because you wouldn't be able to televise the meeting, you wouldn't be able to, you don't have the equipment and you don't have the space.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's right.
Sunshine's expensive.
Yeah, so we can't tell you that we would have a quorum for the meeting. I mean, and certainly don't want you to go through the expense. There are only two members that are here. Now, there are other members who are not here, and they might ostensibly be available, so you might get that quorum, but we can't tell you that right here, right now. You only got two.
Back to the issue of possibly doing it on the 19th, is it a ordinance requirement that the hearings be televised as opposed to getting a court stenographer?
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Requirement.
There'd be minutes kept of it, there'd be minutes kept of the meeting.
What we can do is ask SOPAC some available dates for here as well as upstairs, because we can videotape it upstairs.
May I ask a stupid question? I mean, we're here now. Is there any way to get somebody from SOPAC to answer the question now?
No.
As opposed to?
There are two individuals that would have to answer that question. One does bookings, one does rentals. It would have to be something done by email. It usually actually takes a couple days for us to get answers on what days are available.
So, okay, and just when we were emailing, when there was emails going back and forth, the 25th was one of 2 days. Was there not a second
I
day?
think there was a second date, which was the 28th, but I believe there were, from what I understand, a bunch of members, because it was the Thursday before the holiday weekend, that weren't available.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be any different. It wouldn't be any different for me, so I don't know if it's different for anybody else.
I'm available on the 28th.
Okay, so that does change for at least one person. Adam, are you available on the 28th?
Looks like it.
Okay. Danny, you available on the 28th? No. So it doesn't get us any closer, unfortunately.
No, the 28th is a Thursday.
That is correct.
Oh, thought you said a Wednesday.
If I did, I misspoke. I was saying a Thursday. Sorry.
We are, and if I can just interrupt one more time.
Please.
With your indulgence. We have to notice anyway, for this, because we have a couple of variances that we are requesting. So certainly, if we, let's say the collective we, came up with a date, I guess once you contacted SOPAC to even use the room upstairs, at a date maybe even during the week of August 19th, some other date, then I don't believe that's going to foreclose us from still sending out the requisite notice, as long as we can decide it literally within the next 48 hours, because I have a newspaper publication requirement.
Okay. I have no problem with that. So let's just chat now amongst ourselves. Do you know what dates during the week of the 18th, or are you just saying any date during the week of the 18th you're going to make yourself
Let me just check
available?
with my engineer just one second.
I can tell you the week of the 18th, I'm not here.
Yeah, me either.
Me either.
Danny, what are you taking a month off
Sorry,
here?
going back to Israel.
I'm kidding. Good for you. Adam, the week of the 18th?
Around all month.
Michael?
I'm good the 18th, I'm good the 19th, I'm not good the 22nd, I'm good the 20th and 21st. So
Okay.
other than Friday night.
Well, we're not meeting on Friday night, I can promise you.
I said, other than Friday night, I'm fine.
Lillian?
Not available the 21st, 22nd of that week.
But you're available the 18th, 19th, 20th.
Yes.
Reverend Wilson?
I'm not available until the 22nd, 21st or 21st. I'm out that whole week until the 21st.
4. My guess is we can get a fifth person. We just need 5, right?
Right.
I'm betting we can get a fifth.
The village president Torpy would not be able to participate in this.
Oh, because it's the rescue squad,
Right.
right. That would
And
leave.
Rosner may
Well,
not.
Mark may not be well, so who's not here?
That's Michael Lerman and who else?
I think that might be it.
Somebody else?
We don't have one alternate.
We're missing an alternate.
I'm sorry, who won't be here when?
I'm sorry? Boy, I think we're running up against a problem of creating a quorum for you. I mean, I hate to say this. I mean, I'm happy with the meeting going ahead without me, but unfortunately, it's just a bad time.
Yeah, I do, the rescue squad certainly appreciates your efforts, obviously, in trying to accommodate us, and it sounds like it's going a bit south, I think because of the time of the year.
I just want to say there's nothing wrong with the South.
Duly noted.
Just a quick question. Though we have 1, 2, 3, 4 for the 18th and 19th, correct? Right? Were the 18th or 19th dates that you were available? No. Sorry. Okay.
19th is what?
The preservation.
Historical preservation. Is the 18th open?
Doesn't have to be here, it can be
Just-
upstairs.
Okay, fine.
one
So,
can
but it
go
could be
upstairs.
upstairs.
Yeah, it doesn't have
Okay,
to be
fine.
video.
So, are you available on the 18th and the 19th?
I believe so, yes. Jeff?
No, it doesn't have to be video.
Yes.
Okay, so, Jetta, can you reach out to Michael? Maybe send him an email tonight, call him tomorrow. Can you be here on the 18th or the 19th?
I won't be here, but
But you have counsel from your office? Susan?
If I can't be, somebody will be here.
Sal?
I'm not sure yet about my schedule. My only concern is the 18th or the 19th is cutting it very close for getting notices out, getting in the paper.
I'm saying this is a very long shot, but
if it's that important to the rescue squad for all the good work they do, if we can try to, if it can get done, we'll try to do it. If we can't, then it can't.
And we'll find out, certainly, since we're having this dialogue, we can find out as early as tomorrow whether, to Sal's point, we can meet the publication deadline.
Yeah, if you can't
We already have our 200-foot list. My mailings are all ready to go, so that's not going to be an issue.
Yes.
The IT, Stephen, is this the 18th something that we could videotape upstairs? 18th? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we're going to find out whether or not Michael's available. If he's available, then I hate to point out one other small thing, which is if any one of us can't make it that night for whatever reason that is unanticipated, we're back in the same spot. I mean, so even if everything goes right, it's still a not a crapshoot, but it's still possibly not going to work. I mean, September, I'll ask the question just to hear myself ask it. Is it that important to you that you're going to go through all this effort for the possibility of a meeting that then ultimately, for whatever reason, does not occur? So if you say yes, we'll look into it, but...
I think at this point the answer is yes, because based on my understanding of their current situation, I'd like to try to accommodate them, certainly sooner than later. And if it doesn't work, we're forewarned and we appreciate the efforts.
Okay. So we're looking at either the 18th or the 19th, and assuming that does not work, then the 3rd, which is September 3rd, which is our regularly scheduled.
That's that Wednesday, correct.
Okay. So, Jetta, you'll be in contact with us and with council tomorrow so we can, wrap this up. And you're going to check as to whether or not we can still meet the notice deadlines. You can meet the notice deadlines.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It won't make the deadline for the news record.
It won't?
No. But so it would have to be, I believe, in the Star Ledger. Patrick?
And I think for the Star Ledger, we probably will be able to make it.
Star Ledger, you probably can make it, but the news record most likely.
Is that adequate?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. So we should have an answer within 24 to 48 hours as to which date we'll be going forward with.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate the accommodation.
Okay. The only item left on the agenda relates to the Turner case. That is application to be heard, case number 231, Luther P. Turner Jr. and Hazel A. Turner, pending, block 704, lot 1, 14 Kingman Road, which was, I believe, before the Board of Adjustment. Do we have an update on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the Board of Adjustment is scheduled to hear the appeal tomorrow night.
Okay.
Or to begin to hear the appeal tomorrow night.
Okay. Can you explain what the process is ultimately of the appeal and what would happen if it were accepted or not accepted?
The zoning board is hearing an appeal from the HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission's findings that the applicant who seeks to subdivide a property which is in the Montrose District does not, or rather does need a certificate of appropriateness under the ordinance. And so there are two prongs to the appeal. One is procedural, whether or not they actually needed that certificate. And secondly is substantive, and the zoning board is going to begin to hear that appeal tomorrow. The reason I say begin to hear the appeal is a possibility it may not finish because of someone who will not be available tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
before you adjourn, just a quick update. The Master Plan Committee has met for the second time tonight. We are trying to go and get an RFP together.
Can you please turn your microphone on?
We are going to try and get an RFP together to submit to this board for a hearing at the September meeting. So we might want to put that on. It's not guaranteed that we'll be able to get there, but we're going to try and get the RFP ready to go out and try to get it to the board before the September meeting as quickly as we can. And then the Master Plan Committee will make a recommendation as to, and give just a summary in it. And we just hope that once we give the summary, we're just not going to go through it line by line by line, because that would defeat the purpose of the master plan committee.
Okay.
Anything else to add on that, Neil?
That's right.
Lillian?
No, you covered it.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for the report, and thank you for your work. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shortchange
No, I just
it.
wanted to give you an update, just to let you know what we're doing or not doing.
Okay. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye. This meeting is
You'll let us
adjourned.
know
Thank
real
you.
quickly about this meeting before my wife books those nights.
I just sent them